My name is Ian Chang. I am currently an undergrad senior at the University of Utah, and I've been working with SMT for around 3 years now. And I'm here to present a cool metric that we've kind of been developing for the 6-tool product called the route Acumen, grading routes on a curve. So here we have 2 routes. On the bottom, you can kind of see the plot of the field, and on the top, you have the player points of players' individual positions as he runs his route. And we kind of have features where we have the green representing the start of the route, the red represents the end, the asterisk represents the estimated ball landing spot, and we have a radius around that, which I'll get into later. And we have a color gradient assigned with each point, which represents the player's speed, dark representing slow, and as the color gets lighter, the player's getting faster. And lastly, we have the straight line from start to end of the route. And so what do we see here? With the route on the left, we have the center fielder kind of going in and then moving back to get around behind the ball to make the catch. And similarly on the right, he's kind of taking a gradual path to get around behind the ball to make a catch as well. So the route efficiency for the plot on the left is 60%, and the route efficiency for the route on the right is 40%. And would you say that those numbers accurately represent how well the route was run? I would say no. I'd say those numbers are way too low, and I'd actually argue that the route on the right was run better than the route on the left. So that was kind of the base motivation for the route Acumen. Route efficiency, we know as straight line distance divided by total distance traveled. It's supposed to represent how well a route was run. But the question is, does route efficiency capture every aspect of a good route? I would say no, because we see it introduce selection bias to balls that are not caught. And it's also incomplete and insufficient because it only takes into account distance. It's missing multiple key factors such as how smooth a player runs his route, adjustments that a player might make, and decision-making, such as the route at the bottom where he overruns the ball to come around behind the ball to make a play. And so that was the goal of the route Acumen. We wanted to take into account those missing factors, build on route efficiency, and kind of build a better metric to capture the quality of a route from an on-field standpoint. But to do that, we have to sort of define what a good route is. So in our eyes, a good route is if the player put himself in the best position to catch the ball in the way that they intended to. Of the routes that we analyzed, we kind of found common characteristics of a good route. Every good route had the player maintaining consistency in the way he ran his route. He also got to the catch point early, and he also didn't backtrack in his path. But how do we quantify this? So this is where we introduce constraints. We look at what quantifiable features were common in every route. So every route has a certain speed and distance the player goes, and every route has a certain speed and direction that the player takes, and then every route has a certain distance the player covers to get to the ball. And there's also a certain path the player takes, which includes turning or inflection points, or paths that backtrack and trail the ball. And I'll kind of define each of these constraints in the next few slides. But the main premise of these constraints is that if the player does well in all of these, then they've put themselves in a good position to catch the ball, hence therefore making it a good route. So before I go into the constraints, I want to briefly introduce the catchable radius. It's the radius that you see around the catch point, and it's an arbitrary 5-foot radius around the ball landing spot. We implemented this because we wanted to separate the skill of catching the ball versus the skill of actually running the route. We say that whenever the players enter this 5-foot radius, whatever movement or whatever happens within this 5 feet, it doesn't matter because 5 feet should be enough for the player to make a play on the ball and catch the ball. If he doesn't, then that's kind of on him. And if you kind of don't see it that way, then maybe you can just ask Aaron Judge, and he can probably attest to it. So our first constraint is the angular smoothness. This just deals with how smooth the player's direction is as he runs his route. We measure this by taking the change in angular difference at each point along the route. So the goal of this was we just wanted to minimize the change in direction. So at each point, we take angular difference or angular change, and then we'll take the difference between them. So the larger the difference, the more angular change there is. The smaller the difference, the more smooth his route should be. So we can see examples of this. On the left here, you see a route with bad angular smoothness. If you look at the player position plot, you can see it's very jittery. There's multiple points with large changes of direction, so closer to the end. And so there you'll have with the large differences, it'll increase the score for angular smoothness. So you can just see that it's not a very smooth route. Whereas the route on the right, he takes a very gradual, very smooth path to get to the ball, and there's very minimal change in angle along the route. So that'll be a route with good angular smoothness. Our second constraint is the speed smoothness. This just deals with the speed, how smooth the player is moving in his speed. It's just a change in instantaneous velocity along the route, and we do take an average value of that over a rolling 1 second window. And what we want to encourage here is just a minimal change in speed. So here we take the speed vector from point to point, and we'll also take the difference between them. So similarly with angular smoothness, the larger the difference in speed, the less smooth it is, but the smaller the difference, the more consistent he is in his speed. So we can illustrate that. On the left again, it's a route with bad speed smoothness. You can see there's jumps in his path where there's parts of sudden acceleration or deceleration, which is inconsistent and bad for a route. So that's a route with bad speed smoothness. Whereas the route on the right, he's maintaining a very constant smooth speed. There's very minimal change in speed along the path. So our third constraint is route duration. We also call it the hurry up predictor. So what we want to gauge here is how fast does a player have to go to get to the ball? And so how do we really quantify that? So at each point, we have the player's distance and time away from when the ball lands, hence the duration part of this constraint. And using that, we can take an expected velocity by calculating distance divided by time. That'll give us how fast the player's expected to go at that point in the route. And so we can compare that with the player's actual velocity. And so we say if the player's actual velocity is slower than how fast he's expected to go, then he's behind the route and he needs to hurry up. But if he's faster, then he's ahead of the ball and he can get to the catch point early, which is what we want to encourage. We want to encourage a player getting to the catch point early to catch the ball. So you can kind of see examples of this. The route on the left, you see the player sticking around at the beginning of the route. So as time increases, his expected velocity is also increasing, but his real speed is still very minimal. If not, like he's still standing there. So he realizes that he needs to hurry up. And you can see that as he realizes that he's sprinting, he's going max speed and practically making a diving grab for the ball, which is bad for a route. So that's a route with bad route duration. Whereas the route on the right, you can see right off the crack of the bat, he's going a good speed, traveling towards the ball, and getting himself to the catch point early. So he can kind of stay there and wait for the ball to get to him, which makes the route good. So that's a route with good route duration. Our fourth constraint is the backtracking penalty. This one's kind of self-explanatory. We just penalize the player if he backtracks away from the ball at any point of the route. And we know that a good route will always have the player traveling towards the ball. So we'll just penalize any distance where the player goes away from the catch point. And you can see example of this where with the route on the left, he's backtracking for basically half the route. So we'll penalize all those points. Whereas the route on the right, he's always maintaining a forward path toward the ball. So we won't penalize him for that at all. Our last constraint is the orientation and momentum subscore. This deals with the player's positioning. As a fielder, we say it's easier for you to catch the ball if it's in front of you. And we can test that when I chuck this at one of you guys. But we say if the player is moving in a way where the ball is going over his head, not between himself and the plate, then that's making the catch harder for you because you got to either make an over-the-shoulder grab or kind of twist your body in a way to catch the ball. So to quantify that, we take the straight line distance the straight line from the start of the catch to the end of the catch. So for example, from point A to point E here, and we say any position where you've put yourself under the line or on the line close on the part of the line where it's closer to home plate, we'll penalize that because the path that you're taking there is going to work towards putting yourself in a worse position to catch the ball. Whereas if you're positioning yourself on the other side of the line as you run your route, then you're going to put yourself in a position where you maintain the ball between you and home plate. You're always going to keep the ball in front of you. So with that, you're staying behind the ball, and that's what we want to reward. So to show examples of this, these are both kind of good routes, where the route on the left, he has to run inwards to catch the ball, but he moves horizontally first to kind of line himself up with the ball, and then he moves in, making it a lot of an easier catch for him. Whereas the route on the right, you see he kind of starts on the home plate side or under the line. So we'll penalize those points, but he makes the adjustment to travel back over the line, and you can see that when he makes the catch, he's behind the ball. He's positioned himself in a better way to catch the ball. You can imagine if he keeps running under that line, then what's going to happen is the ball is going to go over him when at the catch point, and it's either going to be an over-the-shoulder catch or he's going to twist his body. So that's what we don't want. So now that we've established our constraints, we can kind of define the model. So our route acumen model is just a weighted sum of the constraints. And since each constraint is a kind of penalty we want to minimize, the lower the score, the better the player has done in each constraint. And with our model, we've normalized each constraint to the same scale, and we implemented some machine learning to learn the weights for each constraint. And then we validated our model. We used an intuitive eye test to kind of tell whether or not our model was accurate and consistent with, kind of what our eyes sees. So I'll actually kind of walk through some examples with you guys. But to do that, we have to compare the route acumen with the route efficiency. And when we do that, we kind of get 4 quadrants here. And I'll show an example of a route that lies within each quadrant. And we'll kind of work backwards here. But so quadrant 4 is where route efficiency and our model both deem the route to be a good route. And an example of a route that lies within that quadrant is this one right here. And I think that using our eye, we can all see that this is a good route. Quadrant 3 is where route efficiency says this is a bad route, but our model says this is a good route. This is the one that we saw earlier in the slides, but you can see that our model thinks this is a good route because of how consistent he runs. He's positioning himself in a good position to make the catch. He's not backtracking. He's getting to the catch point early. So I think using our own discretion, we can kind of say that this is a good route. Quadrant 2 is where both metrics agree that this is a bad route. I don't think I need to go too much into this one. We can all kind of see that this is a terrible route. And lastly, quadrant 1, this is where route efficiency says this is a good route. And you can see why. It's because his path he takes is really close to that straight line. But our model says this is a bad route. Looking into the player's positioning, you can kind of see he's jittery throughout the whole path. He's not consistent. It's not smooth. And for most of the route, he's putting himself in a bad position to catch the ball. So using our own discretion, we can say this is not as good of a route. And our model agrees with that. So those are just the examples for each quadrant that we looked at. And the route acumen is still a developing and kind of improving model. There's multiple things we want to consider implement into our model, such as game state and base runners. We know a player will run a different route than he usually would if there's a player on third base that potentially has a chance to tag. And there's also edge cases that we've seen, such as this route on the left, where route acumen says this is a good route because of how consistent he's running, but using our own discretion, we can say that this is, it's not that great of a route. So yeah, that concludes my talk. I want to thank SABR for the opportunity to be able to present to you guys, as well as thank the 6 host schools for providing for the data for us. And I hope that this presentation has persuaded you of why the route acumen is necessary and can work. But if there's any questions, comments, or even ideas that you guys have, Meredith, Nick, and I would be more than happy to discuss with you guys. So yeah, thank you.